There we go. Okay, we are recording. Hello, everybody. So nice to see so many familiar faces. Thank you all so much for joining us today. My name is Rose Guth Ginocchio, and I am the executive director of the Leo Marchute School. I know pretty much all of you, but just in case. And we are so excited today to have Grace Darden as our featured artist for October, joining us today for an artist talk. And both Grace and I are having a little, throat issues today. So if we sound a little dry or like we're out of our voices, just bear with us. So I'm going to briefly introduce Grace and then hand her the floor so she can give her talk to all of you. So let's get started. So we are so glad to feature Grace Darden as our featured artist for October 2023. Grace is a painter from Fort Worth, Texas, who first learned of Alan, John, and the Leo Marchute School community in 2014. After attending summer courses and working for two years in graphic design, Grace returned to X to study at the master's level. Grace currently teaches art to children and adults in Northern Michigan and continues to build her practice using nature and the habit of creating as her guides. So without further ado, I'm going to hand the floor over to Grace.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you. I'm sorry if you have trouble hearing me, just let me know. Ask questions and I'll try my best. We'll do our best. Um, so happy to be here, but I'm thrilled to talk about my experience with Marchutes today and a little bit about my career path and life in the arts. And um, I guess I'll start by giving a little backstory. Um, I started diving into art at a pretty young age. Both of my grandmothers, one practiced art full time in her studio, the other is had a great appreciation for the arts. And so we would spend weekends going to the museums in Fort Worth, Texas. Um, that kind of kicked off a trajectory for me. And then in school, I started leaning in towards taking classes and getting more and more involved as I grew up in the arts. I went, I first, well, I guess it was really after college. I was working an office job in Texas, and a family friend of ours, Jill Steenheis, who attended or who went to the or who studied with the Marchutes community in 1980, told me about the school and encouraged me to go there while John and Alan were still instructing. And so I applied the following summer in 2014. And I quit my job and I went over to France to study with the Marchutes community for the summer and apprentice with Jill in her studio and learn a little bit more about her business as well. And so at the end of the summer, I ended up sticking around full time with her for the next 2.5 years. And during that time, I got to know the community through Marchutes a little bit more. And at the end of those 2 years, I went and worked in graphic design for 2 more years in Texas. But then in 2019, I decided to return to X and continue working with the Marchutes community at the master's level. Sorry. And so during that time, unexpectedly, COVID hit. And while it was a very strange time to be in France, it also provided this unique opportunity. And so we were all there in confinement, not able to go anywhere, not really able to see each other. And so you were there to focus, and there's nothing else to work on but the work in front of us. And so it allowed me the time and the solitude and the contemplative space to really dive into my study in art, but particularly the work of Leo Marchut's. Um, while the museums were closed, I was able to spend some extra time in the studio with John and Alan, looking directly at Leo's work, specifically his lithographic series on the streets of X. And so I wrote a paper on his series of the Rue Pavillon, which is a street in X that he drew from extensively. And so it was fascinating because there were no people in the streets at the time. And so we had this unique opportunity to go out and be in X while it was quiet and you could really observe some of the nuanced things happening with the architecture and the light and nature as it reacted to or as it worked with the architecture of X. And so it was fascinating to walk the streets and see these different sites where Leo once worked, and then to try and look at his work and see and explore that inspiration that he had in front of his motifs. And so I ended up writing a paper that spoke more about the evolution that occurred over a 12-year period while he was working from one motif or one from one vantage point, and how that evolved over time as he got to know his subject matter. And what I found was that it really inspired me in how I approached my own creative process. And so I started, instead of going out to the landscape, seeing something beautiful and saying, wow, that's a beautiful tree or that's a beautiful thing. I'm just going to go paint that. It was more about looking at how nature opened up to me in a way that provided nuanced lighting and dark and volumes and color and relationships that create a harmony and a balance. And so it really transformed the way that I approached painting. And so I learned through Marchut's and through my experience of the importance of looking and communicating with others, making it's more of an experience, not just the creating part, but also the looking. And so after that paper, I stuck around X for an additional summer and worked with Denise Lemoine on the catalog raisonné for Leo Marchut's, which seemed like such a historical moment and such a historical thing to be archiving his work, that they were finding, excuse me, we're finding his work all over the world in museums all over the world. And it's fascinating to be studying in a place and walking the footsteps of the artists who've come before, and to be in a community that fosters that relationship to nature and to each other. And so I really gained so much from that community in that way, and have carried it with me, uh, and will always carry it with me pretty much. But after that summer, I returned to Austin, Texas, where Rob and Mary Duffy introduced me to Valor Education, a charter school network in the Austin area, um, and taught art for grades 4 through 8. And so it was a whirlwind of a year. It was such a change, from a departure from what life had been up until that point. And so it was eye-opening, but it was so rewarding to be able to take what I had built from my experience with Marshoots and before that in art, and to carry it over and to share it with children who have seen it for the first time with their own eyes. And so it was a very rewarding experience. Uh, but unfortunately, in April, I was given the news I need a kidney transplant. And so I parted ways with the school and I moved to northern Michigan where my parents live and am currently working with the university on getting a transplant in the next several months, hopefully. And so it's actually allowed me to, once I landed here, I'm surrounded by nature again. And so I'm kind of revisiting tree motifs and things that I had first seen when I arrived at Marshoots through Cezanne's work. And so I'm trying to look back to his work for inspiration because I'm starting to feel a similar need to get into the trees and start working with the trees again. Um, but it's allowed me to dive back into arcs as much as I love teaching. I didn't touch a paintbrush for probably a year. And so it's kind of fun to switch it up again. But that's about it in a nutshell. Sorry for the voice. I know it's really probably hard to listen to, but if I can answer questions or I'd love to do a back and forth with you all.
Yeah, and I can help do questions too, take questions. And if you have a question, maybe just put your hand up like this in front of the screen and I can sort of call on you and then make sure to unmute yourself too. Thank you, Grace, and thank you for going through this even with your
No,
voice gone. It's so appreciated.
of course.
Any questions right off the bat? Alan, go ahead. You're on mute, so you'll have to unmute yourself.
Can we look at some paintings?
Yes, yes. I do not have anything, everything physically is in a storage unit right now, but I do have some images on my computer.
You have a
So
beautiful website,
thank you so much.
beautifully
Okay,
done.
thank you. All right, let's see. So I have here
Oh,
a
wow.
collection. This is the first drawing I did with Marshoots of a copy of a Cezanne, um, a drawing of his forest. And that's kind of what set it all off. So here's a still life. I have just a mix that I'll just go through with you all. And if anyone has anything, I can stop or.
Grace, that first drawing was way back a long time ago when you first.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, that was probably that was the first copy I did.
Mm.
Yeah. And a few still life.
Mm.
Again. There's a portrait. This one, Alan, actually, you had me stop right when I started, and then I did this portrait following. You had me stop right there and start over or start a new one. And so that came after. This landscape, a still life of lithographic stones, and then a lot of trees. There are a lot of trees in here. I really
Wow. Are these in Michigan?
so this is actually olive trees.
Mm, okay.
These two are in Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
This is an old of the cathedral. Those are watercolor.
Oh,
And
God.
here's an almond tree.
Oh, beautiful.
And that's the studio. Bibe Moose. That's a Monet copy. And I did several florals on pastel on paper, and it's just a still life series. And these came a year later. This painting came in 2022 in that one as well.
And where's that from? That one right there? Is that from
This one
Michigan?
is actually North Carolina.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
God.
I was traveling. I was helping Jill out last spring, and so we did a few paintings. This one's from Michigan. And some of these are Cezanne copies. I believe this one is. And then this is one as well. And I think that's where it ends.
So beautiful, Grace.
Oh,
Do you have
thanks,
how
Grace.
do you decide, or do you have a preference on material? Because it seems like you've got oil pastels, pencil, watercolor, oils. How do you, when you go out to paint or sit down to draw, how do you decide what you're going to use? Is it like ease of transportation? Is it the amount of time you have? How do you choose your materials?
I think it really is. If I set out to oil paint, it's more of a big deal. It's kind of, you have all the setup and cleanup, and it's like that is the mission. I'm going out to oil paint. Whereas watercolor is a little bit easier to just take with me if I want to do a quick sketch, or if I'm trying to get the feel of a new motif or a new place. I like to take out watercolor or a sketchbook and just draw it first. Um, I usually like to do a drawing before I go in and paint it with oil.
John Springer, do you have a question?
Yes, Grace, I was wondering if you started doing watercolor before oil or if you did the opposite.
No, I did in school, I did watercolor first, but I really didn't come back to it for a long time. Um, I came in X, I really only did oil painting. And at Marshoots, I really only did oil painting to start. And then I kind of started dipping into watercolor a little bit. But I remember Alan telling me at first when I was trying watercolor, he was like, keep working at it. You'll get there, because it took me a minute to really let go, let go with it. I was a little more like laying it down in layers, and it was a totally different process. So it didn't really translate. I guess my brushstrokes didn't translate at first in watercolor that well,
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
definitely. I mean, how do you feel about the experience with creating a palette in oil versus creating a palette in watercolor?
I think it's much more contemplative with oil. I love creating a palette with oil, whereas with watercolor, it's more kind of just mixing one color at a time. I don't really have like set colors out, so it's kind of just mixing it. It's just totally different. I kind of do it as I can with watercolor, if that
Cool.
makes sense.
Rose, could we, or whoever's doing it, could we go back to that North Carolina painting while we're talking? Just look at that a while. I mean,
Here, I'll
everybody.
flip this.
I just want, yeah. My goodness. I would love to do a three-way comparison between this painting and the portrait that you stopped on and the portrait that you did after the one when you stopped on it. That would be really fun, but we probably can't do that. But wow, Grace, this is a beautiful painting right here.
Thank you so much. I'm trying to, I wonder. No, I can't really do it that well. Well, hold on, I have an idea.
Yeah. Oh wow, look at that.
I'm gonna try and see if I can make this bigger.
And then that big painting that's on the easel, that's incredible too. I mean, sometimes your paintings just are like sublime.
Thank you so much.
Wow. That is interesting, isn't it, John? Where's John? Wow.
Thanks.
Looks like John is on here, but I can't see him.
I just love the way I don't know what you think of, if you're mad at me because I made you stop on that painting, but there's something I find really beautiful about that in terms of how the surface is all organized in terms of the whites of the surface. And then when you come to that beautiful landscape where you sort of filled in, it's not a lot of white surface, there's lots of beautiful strokes, but it has the same fullness of volume in it.
No, I was not mad at you at all. No, I remember that session and I was very frustrated with the first painting I did, which was just, I just kept going in on it. And this really, it was a helpful thing.
Yeah.
I know there are lots of moments like that
that landscape is just so full of your vision. It's an image of just a full vision. You don't really focus on objects, although it has a lot of beautiful objects in it. It's just so incredible how the lights, how it all works there together with that yellow light that's down on the right in relation to the little red accent in the middle of the paint. It's just exquisite. Yeah, I think.
Thank you so much.
Elise, do you have a question?
Yes, Grace, it reminds me a little bit in terms of a motif, as it has a lot of similarities with other paintings you've done of the walk towards the studio when one is on the garden and just looking towards the studio. And I'm just thinking how interesting it is that you're finding some similar patterns in your vision and in your motif, even in North Carolina. And are there things like that you're surprised that you're rediscovering in your work, even if you're in the US, and or not, in terms of the presence of the trees and the path?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Pauline, because that is something that recently has become much more apparent than it was before. And even putting together this little talk with you all has helped me to kind of look through everything and comb through everything and see how there's a repeating pattern that happens, and there's like a certain source that keeps drawing me back. And so I'm sure many of you as artists can relate to that.
But I think there's also a hidden thing happening too, because I'm not sure, maybe I'm just making stuff up, but the portrait on the sort of finished portrait, I'm not sure when that was done, but I think it was probably done before you did your really intensive study on Leo. But is that right or wrong?
It's before I finished it, yes.
Before you finished it. But
Yes.
all of that work that you did on Leo, I feel like it's definitely showing itself in the North Carolina painting, where you've digested everything that you saw and learned looking at Leo's lithographs. There's a whole kind of new step, a big step there in terms of how you're putting the painting together as one whole sort of magical thing.
No, that the year working on Leo's or studying Leo's work was just something that I think keeps reminding me of how important it was. And I didn't really realize it even when I was writing about the work. I don't think I realized it. And so thank you for saying that, because that makes me feel pretty good spending time working on his or studying his work.
Well, it's a beautiful paper too. Is your paper, have you got your paper published on your website? Because if you do, everybody ought to go read it. It's pretty incredible what you did.
There is a link in the about page that can
Okay.
take you to it. I don't have it officially published though.
Yeah.
I can send a link to everyone with the link to the paper after the talk, so they can go and read it.
Thanks.
Grace, I wonder how your teaching experience at Valor affected your practice as an artist. Did you have anything new that you learned through teaching the students art? I know you said you didn't get the chance to paint during the year that you were teaching, but was there anything that sort of shifted how you saw your own practice through the act of teaching the kids?
Oh, definitely. Because the kids will say something or see something that I've never seen before. And um, we would have discussions about artwork that were really powerful discussions, especially for their what you would think would be what they would be talking about at their age. And so it was kind of like just like in seminars with Marshoots. Each seminar, you could go to the same seminar endless times and you hear something new and you interact with a new group and there's something new to learn each time. Well, it was the same with the classroom, because one class would say one thing, the next class would say something different, and it would provide just a rich experience and a great space to talk about art and to learn more from them. And so it was incredible.
Any other questions for Grace, anybody? Yeah, John.
Hey, um, you know, your still lives are amazing, and I just wonder if you are planning on doing any more, or do you like to create your own?
Thank you. Yeah, yeah. I
Let's
do
look.
love still life.
Put some of them up.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt. While you're talking about them. Yeah. Guapa.
That's one. Um that one. And then there's let's see, I think there's the lithograph. Oh yeah. So, and yeah, still life it was always incredible because still life always came right after, or in the fall, it would come right after the landscape with more shoots. And so I feel like with the landscape, you just have all of this nature to draw from. And so choosing what to draw is so difficult because you have everything and you want to do everything, and it can be chaotic. And when the painting seemed so chaotic, it was nice to go into still life where there still was so much to draw and it could be chaotic, but really the forms were arranged in such a specific way. And so it allowed your eyes to focus on the different volumes that connected with each other and interacted with each other. And so I was fascinated by that play between light and dark and color, because color's always been a little more difficult for me. I don't know if anyone can relate, but I find I always start with the light. I always find some sort of light in nature. And if I start to go in with the color, sometimes I feel like it gets muddied up with different colors, but maybe the same values. And so my brain kind of goes haywire.
So just to understand that better, so like going in and finding the light, and then how do you make the transition into thinking color? That's really hard. Maybe
That's it. Or that's like the difficulty I've, or that's what I find most difficult is trying to translate the values and the light into color, if that makes sense.
You do a pretty good job.
Thanks.
I find something really beautiful in your work. You know, there's two sort of really, I mean, the voluminous effect of the volumes, the different volumes in this painting is so incredible. You have that going on, like that rectangle up on the right. You know, you've really sort of created this voluminous volume there. All of the volumes in this painting, it seems like the volume is more accentuated. But then can you go back? Can you go back to one of your still lifes? And then the other thing, like if we pick that still life right there, yes, that one. Oh God, you know, what you articulate in the force of your strokes is just incredible to me. You know, this seems more like you're speaking through the strokes and the color. It's much more sort of, I don't know what the right word is, but you know, every stroke has this force to it.
Thank you, Ellen.
Not as much related to each individual volume, although you have the volumes there. It's just, I love the way you have this magnificent feeling for articulating your vision with one stroke. Every stroke is just so full of passion.
Thank you so much.
Do you sort of see what I mean in terms of the two different approaches? One, you're sort of talking about the fullness of the volumes, and here you're speaking with emotion through just incredible.
Yeah, it's a little different.
Drawing strokes. Yeah, it's a little different. Both of them wonderfully incredible. Yeah. My goodness.
Grace, did you say you had time to paint in Michigan a little bit? Have you been finding pockets of time?
I'm working on it. I set up the easel and have most of the paint. We're pretty far north, and so there's not an art store here. But I hopped on Amazon and ordered some stuff. So hopefully we can get to painting soon. I've been watercoloring and doing some sketching in the meantime, but I've found some spots on Lake Michigan that are just idyllic. And y'all, it is something I did not expect to stumble upon. And so it's been really a gift to be here and to have this time to get back to it.
Right? I can't wait to see what you're up to.
Thanks, Rose. Sorry, I know I kept it really concise and quick, but happy to
Don't be
answer any
sorry.
other questions.
Any
Your
other
paintings
questions? What's that, Alan?
Well, her paintings do a lot of the talking. I mean, they're pretty incredible.
Really?
Yeah, that's what I was sorry going to say. I just found myself like when we are in seminar in a museum, just looking at the work to let the work speak for itself, because I feel like there's so much that is being revealed to us just by looking. And I'm really fascinated by that one that you did in North Carolina, and thinking about what Alan said about the fullness that is either in the volume and the light, and also
Look at
for
that.
the stroke. There's something that this one seems to be a combination of the two. I don't know if Alan, you would agree with that, but there's something that this one has a lot of nature, but it has a sense of a construction also of a still life in a way. Um, am I making sense when I say that?
Yes.
And so I feel like in this one in particular, Grace, I mean, it is really mesmerizing. I'm fascinated by the quality of the light that goes in between some sort of orangey, more like yellowish, light red, pinkish tones, and the purpleness, the purpleness of these shadows and how they operate with the yellow light, and how everything is caught up in one movement, both with the passion of your strokes, but there is so much mystery that you're suggesting in the distance with the grays. You see that are sort of disappearing, and then boom, we're being brought back to a foreground. But the foreground is constantly also elevating us, and there's this beautiful movement in it.
Well, also that dark black stroke that's up in the top right corner. I wonder where that came from. I mean, that is so incredible. When you take that out, it just sort of becomes like another normal, very nice, normal, beautiful landscape. But that dark stroke up there is just amazing in terms of how it activates the abstraction that's in the painting. Beautiful.
Thank you all for your feedback. This has been a treat.
For us, Grace. Mainly for us. Mary, do you have a question? You have to go in. Yeah.
Yeah. You had mentioned the influence of Leo Marchutz on your work a little bit. Are there other artists that you found to be really inspiring from art history, or more modern, like Leo Marchutz, or who were some kind of influences for your work or inspirations?
Hi, Mary. You know, I don't know. When I was working with Jill, I heard of Francois Diaz, and I think his work really threw threw me off guard, but I just was in awe by it because I didn't know how he arrived at the incredible brushstrokes he has. And so she started showing me, excuse me, his work definitely I found beautiful. While I was at working with Marshoots, I really took to Turner a lot too. He was kind of one that set me off on my watercolors. I'm trying to think of who else. So many artists. I mean, Cezanne kind of unexpectedly has crept up on me more and more over the years, especially his tree motifs.
Beautiful. Any questions from the audience? If not, we can wrap up here. Thank you all so much for joining, and I can keep the Zoom. I'm going to stop the recording now, but we can keep the Zoom open if anyone wants to just stay and chat with Grace or ask other questions. But let's first all give a big round of applause, a virtual round of applause to Grace for taking the time to share her story and her paintings and drawings with us. Thank you so much, Grace, for taking the time, especially when you have a lost voice today. We really
Oh,
appreciate you taking the time and the
I'm
effort to share
I'm thrilled
everything
to
with
see
us.
everyone, and thank you for coming and bearing with me. This
Oh,
has been
so
special.
wonderful. Thank you. We really appreciate it. Okay, I'm gonna
Of
stop
course.
the recording.